I really saw a gap in the way that science is communicated to people, particularly women. And I really felt a calling to just get out there and be a part of solving some big problems. I'm not against supplements, but I
Mm.
think I'm against the marketing of them, and I'm against the way that they're pushed on women and vulnerable women, and it makes us feel like we're not actually good enough just as we are, and so we need them. Most things in nutrition, more does not equal better, but for fiber, more is better. And the more that you can fit into your diet, the healthier your gut environment will be.
Welcome to the Life on Purpose Over 40 podcast, where empowerment, elegance, and health take center stage. I'll be your guide on this thrilling journey to outshine your past self. This is a podcast all about transformation. We're plunging headfirst into exactly what health, wellness, style, relationships, and career look like as a woman over 40. You'll be hearing from all the most sought-after global trailblazers and experts. This isn't just about learning, it's about embracing your inner, fierce, fabulous self. Let's get started.
Hi, welcome back to the podcast. We have Angela Giannoni with us today, Dr. Angela Giannoni. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have a chat.
Fantastic. Now, we were just talking before we actually started recording. I had to say we have to push record because we were getting so far into our conversation. And it's so lovely to talk to you because I think women, especially women over 40, do not realize how important gut health is. And something you mentioned, and I had a note here that I wanted to ask you about, is that there's so much BS out there. There's so many things that we're told, so many fake stories, so many confusing, conflicting pieces of information that we just don't know where to take this information sometimes. And what I really wanted to have you on here, I found you on Threads and I found some things that you're talking about. And I said, oh my God, I need to have you because I think that you can help us clear up some things that are making our lives harder. I think making our lives much, much harder than they need to be. So let's start off by talking about a little bit about your background, what you do, how you became a doctor in this area, and let us know why you're so passionate about gut health.
Well, that's a good way to start, actually, because I kind of love telling this story. So I'm a nutritionist, and that's my background and my training. And I graduated as a nutritionist over 20 years ago now, so quite a long time ago. But when my kids were little, I had a bit of time off when I had babies, and I have three boys. And so I had three boys in 3 years. And when they were very small, I thought I wanted to, get back into the workforce. And I thought doing a research degree would be a great way to get back to work because it's pretty flexible. And in Australia, if you are lucky enough, you can get a scholarship which pays you to do your research degree. So I was lucky enough to get one of those. And managing that with three small children under my feet was rather a challenge. And I wasn't entirely sure about studying gut health at the outset, but because I knew that I would be in the lab with poo samples for a few years. But I said yes, embraced the challenge, and honestly, it was the best thing I've ever done in my life. I just learned so much. And I think having kids while I was studying, kids at home while I was studying, and dealing with some pretty complex situation at home, which I had to sort of since exit myself from, has given me a really unique perspective on the science. And I really feel like we need to bring some compassion and kindness back to nutrition and gut health. And I really saw a gap in the way that science is communicated to people, particularly women. And I really felt a calling to just get out there and be a part of solving some big problems.
I love that. You mentioned a word there that I found really interesting, and I just want to throw in there. You have a new book, which you just told me off air because you're just getting it at the moment.
Yeah.
It's coming out. But there's a book you just wrote called A Peaceful Gut, Mind and Body.
Yeah.
And then you just use the word compassion. So can you just explain that a little bit more? What do you mean by that, being more compassionate?
So I think this is a really important thing for women because on our social media feeds, like every day, we see, weight loss stories and supplements being pushed at us, and even actually quite um, coercively almost the people that are trying to affiliately sell you something by being
Mm,
nice to you. So you don't really even know if that person on the other end of the conversation that you might be having is genuine or whether they're just trying to flog you a supplement. So
mm,
I think it's become so marketing driven across many platforms that one, it's hard to work out what the true picture and story is. And secondly, the effect that has on us mentally is it makes us feel like we're not good enough as we are. And
mm.
I really want to try and flip the script on that because once you understand a bit more about what your body does on the inside and how it works, and particularly the gut microbiome, because it is pretty damn cool, you can really start to have a new respect and love for yourself. And that love and respect spills over to many other things in your life, including wanting to nurture yourself better and then being able to see through some of that stuff that's thrown in your
Mm.
face every day and having the empowerment to decide for yourself if you need that or not. And education is power, right? And so I want to help particularly women get that back because I think we lost it somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. And so many thoughts are going through my head as you were saying that. For example, there's a lot of evidence now talking about how the gut and the brain are so
Yeah.
connected, and there's so much more research about how gut health can equal mental health and can lower depression rates. There's a huge amount of research going into that at the moment. And I think that it plays on what you just said of that as women, we don't think we're good enough and we look at
Yeah.
what everyone else is doing. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday and they were saying, oh, as women, especially over 40, here we are worried about that we're not good enough. But everything, all the marketing out there is for women under the age of 40. That, it's coming from 25-year-old women that look amazing. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course their bodies look amazing. And then they're selling us, like you said, a supplement. And it's just crazy. And then the other side of it that I was thinking of was Andrew Huberman, for example. Love the
Yep.
guy. I think he's brilliant in so many ways. But I was just watching an expose on him and what he's been doing and how he's been pushing these green supplements.
Mm.
And they speak about how he's been pushing that. And really, I respect him in so many ways, but in other ways, I think he's just about the money now. And
Yeah.
with him, he's selling this supplement that they've actually proven on his website. He talks about the science of it, but they show no science based evidence about it, which is disrespectful. And
Yeah.
like you said, what I don't like is that what it makes us think is, oh, we must not be good enough because we need to take these supplements. And
Yeah,
he is telling
exactly.
us the truth. So he's trying to help us. And he's not actually trying to help us. He's trying to help his back pocket. That's what he's trying to help. And I wrote down here before we got on the call, one big thing that I think that you mentioned supplements. I do take some supplements, but that's because of all the tests that I've been getting done about hormones. However, I love your idea of no supplements because I think that one thing that we do wrong in our society is we jump straight to supplements.
Oh, I
We don't
agree.
try to go into what we need first. And I think that's what you mean by that. So if you want to just go into that a little bit more, let's talk about supplements and what you mean by no supplements and where, yeah, explain that to us about supplements.
So I don't disagree with supplements, and there are a few that I routinely do sort of say to people that they could probably take. So I'm not against supplements, but I
Mm,
think I'm against the marketing of them, and I'm against the way that they're pushed on women and vulnerable women, and it makes us feel like we're not actually good enough just as we are, and so we need them. And
mm,
that marketing is I don't think it helps build us up. In fact, I think it puts us down mentally. And so when you understand a bit more about your body and how it works and what you might need for yourself, then you can decide for yourself if you do think you need a supplement or not. And then the other part of that equation is that the gut microbiome is And I call it, in my book, I refer to it as an Amazon rainforest because let's face it, it is. It's this beautiful ecosystem in there. And when you think about a rainforest, you think about how it's in balance, right? You wouldn't introduce a new weed into the
Mhm.
rainforest without some really hard science showing that it's not going to be um, take over the forest and be a pest in the bush, as has happened in Australia. You know, many
I was going to
many
say, please
yeah,
don't.
there's many plants that have been introduced into Australia which are have run wild and haven't gone well. So and our gut is very much the same. And so when a lot of new supplements come on the market, and there are so many new ones at the moment,
Mm,
the testing that is done on them or the clinical trials to support what they say about them are usually done on very small populations of people. So if you go and read the science behind them, it might say um, a small pilot study of 20 people showed this effect.
mm,
But in those studies, they very rarely test the impact on the gut microbiome, and they very rarely test longer than a 4 week to 2 month time period. So my other problem with them is that we don't really understand what we're messing with. Like
mm,
we take a lot of things sometimes, but do they reach the gut microbiome? Yeah, probably a good portion of them do. What effect do they have in the gut microbiome? Is it favorable or is it unfavorable or is it just going to take some time to be unfavorable? And we don't know the answers to most of those yet. So I think we are right to be a bit more cautious with what we put in our mouth, and that applies to supplements as well as other things like some of the ultra processed foods that we should also be
yeah.
wary of. But so I'm very big on maintaining my no supplements. I don't upsell people on supplements, I should say, because I too often there's creators out there that promote a course or promote something, but then they try and affiliate you or bombard you with, oh, buy this product, it's 20% off as well, like you say, for Huberman, lining the back pocket in the
Mm,
meantime. And I just disagree with that. I think it's got to be a
mm.
science first approach which builds people up rather than makes them feel like they're not good enough as they are.
Yeah, I'm I'm a really big believer in what you just said, and we were speaking off air that I've had a lot of gut issues myself. So for
Mm.
me, I'm very passionate about that, and I work very closely. I work with a doctor in Germany that I do all his marketing and like back end admin business stuff for him, and he's very much about understanding blood work first, and he's all
Yeah.
about gut health, and he's all about understanding what people need and creating um, vitamins based on what that actual person needs at that particular time. And because I work so closely with him and I take care of all his like email stuff and helping him with his marketing, I'm learning a lot about that. And
Mm.
one thing that I'm really understanding is how we're really moving into a time period where everything's going to be completely custom for each
Yes.
person. That there's
Yep.
not going to be a shelf at the supermarket with all these vitamins on the shelf anymore. There's going to be your vitamins and that's it. Like we've got it with hair care, we've got it with skincare already, and the vitamin market will move into that. So these like green supplements are not going to be a thing. And I think one thing I found myself, I didn't take that Andrew Huberman one, but I did take some sort of like one of these sort of fancy green raw things or whatever
Yep.
you want to call them. And because of my stomach issues, I find that there's very particular things that I just need to stay away from that just make me sick no matter what. I think that what happens a lot of the time, and you can tell me if this is right or wrong and how you've seen it with your own patients, we get told to take something. So we go out and we take it. We weren't feeling well, so we went and took it. And then we find that that has just, we don't realize, but we think that that's making us better, but we're not, we're wondering why we're not fixed yet.
Yeah.
And then we blame ourselves like, I'm not fixed. What am I doing wrong? I must be the problem because this thing that I was given is not making me better. So I'm the one at fault here. And I think that there's this really ugly cycle that happens. And one thing I did learn along the way with all of my stomach things is how much natural foods can help us,
Mm.
give us a lot of those vitamins, the raw vegetables and things like that that we get from these supplements, we can get from food. So I don't know how much you see that, this cycle of women taking something and then it's actually making it worse for them in many ways.
Yeah, and I think most people that I speak to have got like the supplement drawer or the supplement cupboard where they've bought something because it was promoted to them and they've wanted it for a certain reason, but they took it for a few weeks and that one, they either didn't feel better, or two, it might have given them some other random side effect that they weren't expecting. And so they stopped taking it, they put it in the cupboard and it goes in the supplement graveyard, never to be taken again or taken again some other time point. But, I think we can all relate to having a lot of supplements in the cupboard that we never finished the bottle of because they were promising something, but they didn't fix us. And then so yeah,
Mm,
we end up in this loop of then looking for the next one to try something else to build us up. And so I want to step in and break that cycle for people and help them understand how to feed their gut properly so that you don't need to rely on supplements. And you can use them if you want to, but then you understand what you're buying and what you might specifically need it for and what
mm,
you can expect from it. And that's really empowering, particularly for women, because, stepping off that wagon of feeling like we have to consume all these things all the time is a big deal for many people.
mm. Yeah. And what do you think about, with all the research you've done, is there any difference? Okay, first of all, is there any difference with women who are in, say, their 20s and 30s compared to women in their 40s going into their 50s, into their 60s, when it comes to nutrition that they need to think about? Are you seeing any differences there?
Yeah, so what the research is showing at the moment and particularly in the field of gut health and nutrition, is that as estrogen starts to decline, as we, head into perimenopause and menopause, that estrogen plays a role in maintaining the barrier of our gut lining. So in your colon, which is where your gut microbiome lives, you've got the cells which are stuck together like quite nicely, but when the estrogen starts to drop, those gaps between the cells can become more apparent. And what happens is little particles of food and bacteria that are not meant to be let into the bloodstream end up in the bloodstream. And that can trigger a bit of, underlying low grade inflammation. And I think most women can relate to feeling a bit more aches and pains and, just irritated, all of it. It can influence everything from our mood to our sleep to other hormone levels. So it's a big deal. But the question is, how do we manage that? So during that period, there's many different types of fruits and vegetables that we can eat that can actually help support bringing those cells back together again and maintaining the gut lining so that that inflammation cascade is reduced. And we also know that your gut can also maintain or help maintain your bone density. And we know as we get older, I think we've all heard and we all know that we should be doing some more weight training type exercises as we get older, and we all need to make sure we're eating enough calcium and protein. But one thing that's um, kind of been missed in this conversation is that the health of your gut can really delay the rate of your bones breaking down. So there's specific bacterial species that can inhibit your bone breakdown, which is like the coolest science ever. When
Oh,
I heard about this gut bone axis, I was like, what? And then, you read into the science and the mechanisms behind it and what's happening. And it is just like the coolest thing ever because our gut can communicate with every part of our body. And we have totally dismissed the significance of that in science up until now. And yeah, understanding that midlife or in our 40s is a crucial time for us to have better gut health, even if we aren't having gut issues, because one, it can help us manage our menopause journey, and two, it can help maintain our bones. And basically we can all feel better as well. And I think we can all relate to wanting to get through that phase of our life without feeling terrible.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know about that. But I think a statistic I heard a few years ago was that when you break a bone over the age of 60, I think it is. I don't know if you know the stats better on this. When you break a bone over the age of 60, you have X amount times more chance of dying within 12 months of that happening.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the actual, but it's a crazy statistic
Yeah, it's really
because
high.
they're saying that because we need to look after our bones, if we have bad bone health, then you have a huge chance of dying early.
Yeah, and once you think about how horrible it is to recover from any kind of broken bone, but do that when you're a bit older and make it one of the most critical bones in your body, like a hip or something,
Mhm.
major, and it takes away all your mobility and your independence, then mentally that can be very tough and people don't recover from that well. So I think it's really important for us to, step in and look after ourselves now at this point in our life to protect our future selves. And I
Mm.
think one of the causes of us having a lower bone density for this age group. I was born in 77. I don't know about you, but back when I went through high school, the the thing we did to maintain our weight was just to not eat much. As teenage girls, that's what we did. I think a whole generation of us probably didn't eat enough calcium when we were younger because we were more concerned with how we looked. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's
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 crazy.
yeah, I look back at my past self and think, you look at photos of yourself when you're younger and think how gorgeous you were, and then at the time you never see that though, do you?
I remember my mum saying that to me all the time
Yeah.
when I was like, I used to get picked on by my so-called best friend saying that you're so ugly. All the boys think you're ugly. And I used to cry to my mum, and my mum would say, you're not, you just don't understand it yet.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that at that time, what we think of ourselves as being fat or ugly or not good enough, or yeah, it sticks, doesn't it? And I have
Yeah.
a daughter now, you've got 3 sons, and I think there is a difference with how now what you're teaching your sons. I'm sure that you're teaching them certain things about, especially women, but I hear how I speak to my daughter now, and
Mm.
so many times I catch myself because I say to her, "Oh, you're so beautiful." And I'm like, "No, no, no, and you're smart,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
brave,
Oh,
and
you're
you're."
strong. Yeah.
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 Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
because, I think what we went through, that generation, and I was just listening to a podcast about that yesterday about how, yeah, I'm a couple of years younger than you, so it was that heroin chic, like, it was about being as skinny as
Yeah,
possible,
exactly.
wasn't
It
it?
was that was the trend, wasn't it? Yeah.
And we didn't even know what protein meant. Like, I remember I was listening to something just recently actually where I realized a couple of years ago I needed to do a lot more weightlifting. I found out all of that information. And someone said, "Oh, yeah, but I don't wanna get too muscly." And I was the same. I was like, "I don't wanna get too muscly." And then someone said, "Yeah, because you see all these women walking around with these really big muscles all the time, don't you?" It's just like we don't realize. And but the scariest part is, and anyone listening to this podcast, I'm so proud of those people because I've got a couple of my girlfriends who I adore and I love them so much. However, here we are in our mid 40s, and I was talking to one of my friends, she wants to lose some weight, and she's like, "I'm gonna go running." And I'm like, "No, don't run. You're not gonna lose weight from running. You need to build muscle because the more muscle you have,
Then you can
muscle will
protect
break
yourself.
down
Yeah.
fat." And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Girl, what's going on here?" And I'm like, "Am I the only one that knows it?" And I'm like, "I've got a podcast and I've got people that come on my podcast and teach me. Like, I don't know this stuff myself. I'm taught these things from learning it from other people." And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned for women over 40 is more protein,
Yep.
because the more protein you have, the better it is for your muscle mass, which means we're not going through this situation of worried about losing weight because it's just naturally happening in a more, yeah, much more natural, organic way than trying to go
Yeah.
for a run to lose weight.
I talk about protein in my book too because protein, we know the evidence is quite clear that we need a little bit more protein in our diet than perhaps we previously thought we did,
Mm,
particularly for women in older age. But the one thing that makes it a little complicated is that protein, when it gets to the colon, is not desirable because when bacteria ferment protein, they produce a lot of toxic metabolites, and many of those things are associated with colorectal cancer. So
Mm.
it's got to be a very balance that is individual, and you have to kind of gauge it yourself. You know, if your farts are really smelly, then it's probably a little bit too much protein fermentation happening in the gut, and
Mm.
eating some more fiber and balancing it out is the right approach. But it's a really it when you add in all of these complicating factors around, yes, we need more protein, but protein's bad in the colon. We need to do some weight training. We need to also maintain our VO2 max and have some cardio fitness. You know, it's hard to make sense of that and put that all into perspective, which is kind of why I wrote the book, really, because I wanted to help people understand the science without the overwhelm that goes
Yeah.
with it.
And you mentioned there fiber, and I put this on my list because I said to you at the start, there's quite a few fake stories out there. There's
Mm,
some like crazy stuff going on in, especially, I love the internet and I love podcasts, but there's also a lot of podcasts out there that are spreading misinformation. And that was the whole idea of this podcast. Was I wanted to get guests on here that spoke from a science point of view, because I have moved, and I was saying this last week in an interview, that I have moved away. I was very much science based my whole life. I was like
mm,
not into woo woo. I was not into all this spiritual stuff. But I have found in the last few years that there is more out there about spiritual stuff, and less known scientific information. I think gut health is one of those things that's now more known about. We didn't have a lot of information in that space. So there is this really scary, complicated balance that we need to get somewhere
yeah,
between the science that's available and things that are just coming into play now that we're not completely understanding. And that's where I wanted this podcast to sit, at that spot.
yeah.
Um, but there's so much information out there that's misinformation. I just heard something the other day that was like, fiber's bad for you. We don't actually need fiber. And you keep on mentioning fiber. So, and you laugh when I say that, but this is out there at the moment, that there's a line that we thought fiber was so important. So, laughed and explain. I would love to know what you think about that.
I've had a few I've got sucked into having a few arguments on threads with people that try and tell me that fiber's not essential. So basically, when we eat, food goes into our stomach and then to our small intestine, right? And our human cells take up what they need from the small intestine, which is where we get our energy and our vitamins and our minerals. They come from the small intestine. And then the leftovers go to our Amazon rainforest in the colon, or as I also like to call it, like a compost bin. So, in technical terms, our human cells don't need fiber because that's not their job. They don't take up the fiber, they don't use it. But the bacteria that are in the colon, that's their food. So if you don't feed
Mm.
them, what are they eating? They're going to eat your cell walls lining, or they're going to eat the mucus layer lining your colon. They're hungry, they'll eat what they can. And if that food that's provided for them is only protein and fat and some minimal vegetables, then that gut environment is not going to be a healthy one. So the evidence is very clear that the more fiber we have, the healthier our gut environment is and the better our health outcomes are. So we die less, we get less chronic disease, we have less risk of diabetes, we have less risk of cardiovascular disease, we even have less risk of some and a lot of cancers as well. So it's not just a little reduction in risk. We're talking like it can have a major impact on your life by eating more fiber. And the cutoff that Australia set of around 30 grams a day is probably also a little bit on the low side for maintaining a very healthy gut environment. If you look at traditional hunter gatherer populations, they could eat anywhere from 40 to 100 grams of fiber, depending on where you look. So, most things in nutrition, more does not equal better, but for fiber, more is better. And the more that you can fit into your diet, the healthier your gut environment will be. And that's a real take home message. And the other thing I just want to add about fiber is that it's one word, right? Like you say fiber, but in fact, it's like several hundred different compounds that fall under that definition of fiber. So it's not just one type of compound that feeds the bacteria in there. There's hundreds of different
Wow.
molecules that make up that definition, and they're all different chain lengths, they're all different they have different levels of branching. They're different structures which feed specifically different types of bacteria that are in your colon. And so, to have a truly healthy gut, you have to have a variety of those fibers. So, you can't just eat a purely meat diet and supplement with one fiber supplement, because that's not going to feed the other 999 species that are in your gut. So, it's a complex ecosystem, and we have to feed it with complex range of fibers.
Well, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it. I thought fiber was like vitamin C or
Yeah, yeah,
it's just
and a lot of people do, because it's one word. It's been the way that nutrition developed. It was developed in
original.
it, yeah, and it was developed in the time when I guess the vitamins were developed. So they kind of put all the leftover things that our human body couldn't use and put it in one bucket and said, okay, we're going to call that fiber because it's the leftover parts of the plant cell walls that that don't get used in the small intestine, so we'll call that fiber. But really, that's a very broad range of molecules that make up that definition.
Wow. Okay. So I just learned something new. That's why I love
I'm
doing this
glad.
podcast.
That's
I didn't realize that. I want to ask you a little bit more about that in a second because I want to get into a little bit more step by step.
Yep.
But I've got another question for you about. I heard the other day a podcast, a video, and I laughed. I thought this
Yep.
was hilarious. This guy gets on, and he was actually on the Joe Rogan show, which really annoys me because I think that a lot of stuff he does is also misinformation and it's very scary. I don't want to slam people, but like, yeah, he's got guests on there saying things like what I'm about to tell you. He had a guest on there, and the guest said, I went on a potato diet and lost, I don't know, 20 kilos in 2 weeks, something like that, because he spoke in pounds, so I don't know exactly. And he showed a before and after photo and he said, yeah, I just only ate potatoes. And Joe Rogan was like, wow, that's amazing. And the guy's like, but I didn't put any cream on them. I didn't put any mayonnaise on them. I didn't put any butter on them. It was just plain potatoes and nothing else. And I'm
Mm,
like, yes, if you're going to eat plain potatoes with nothing, it was the cream, it was the mayonnaise, it was the butter, it was all those other things you were putting, all these like extra sauces. It was all that like processed food that you were eating. It's not the fact that you're on a potato diet. It's the fact that you cut out all the other crap
everything
that
else. Yeah.
know? And Joe Rogan's acting like this guy's like just invented the sun. And I was like, I get so frustrated by stories like this because to me, it's like spreading absolute BS of
Mm,
what's actually going on in the body. So, and I was reading the comments and someone's like, yeah, you could just go on any one food diet and have
yes.
the same results. So, how about you just tell us a little bit about what you think about that particular
Yeah, so
story?
there's two things sort of that I want to comment on there, and that is, firstly, potatoes are a good food. So I love potatoes, and I'm very big on people eating potatoes because they're actually quite high in resistant starch, especially if you cook them and then let them cool down a little bit. The starch will cross link on itself a bit and it becomes resistant to digestion and becomes food for your gut bacteria. So potatoes, which are cooked and cooled, are fantastic for your gut, and the weight loss probably resulted from stimulating some good bacterial populations in the gut because he was eating a high amount of resistant starch over those few weeks or however long he did it for. But primarily, I think you lose weight on that kind of diet because you are so bored. Like if you tell yourself you can only eat one food, then you're
How
going to
much
get
you're going to eat of it? You're
yeah,
not
exactly.
snacking
You're
on
gonna get
it.
sick of it. You're gonna get sick of it, and you're just gonna decide that you're not hungry anymore because you don't want to stomach another potato for the day. So I think the main reason that we see weight loss so rapid with that is the one food, and also there's no potatoes are
Mhm.
very low calorie as well. When you don't put anything on them, they're very
Yeah.
low calorie, but they're also very satiating, so they make you feel quite full because they're quite starchy. So they will fill you up with very little calories, and that's why you can probably do that kind of diet for a few days and not suffer too much because the potatoes are quite filling. But those are the reasons for the rapid weight loss. I think there was a story in Australia a couple of years ago about a guy who did a similar thing with potatoes. So it's not a new media fad story, but it's certainly
No.
funny when they come out.
And I think that for what we spoke about before, for women, worst idea in the
Oh,
world to go on that
absolutely.
diet because you
Yeah.
need protein. Like, I will scream all day, all long. A friend of mine actually said she's gonna go on a potato diet herself, and I was like,
Mm.
"No, you need to
No.
have protein. You
Yeah.
need protein." Like, you could go I don't know what your opinion is. You could do it with salmon and potatoes, but don't just do potato diet. Like, that's got to be the worst thing in the world because, that guy and the people in the comments were like, "Yeah, he probably lost some weight, but he also lost a lot of muscle mass as well."
Yeah, he would've. Yeah, and there's no doubt about that. We do if you're going sort of on calorie restriction, if you calorie restrict but consume adequate protein, then the loss of muscle mass is reduced. So, when we lose weight, we don't just lose fat, we lose fat and lean mass. And so the idea of losing weight is to lose less lean mass and more body fat, and you don't do that by just having carbs because you're going to lose everything, and there will be a lot more protein lost in the form of muscle as well.
And for women over the age of 40, it's much harder to build up that because we are losing muscle mass
Yeah,
much faster as we
yeah,
get older,
yep.
and then we can't get it back as easily. So the worst thing you can do is lose any of that muscle mass.
And also a diet that's restrictive like that is not good for us mentally either. Like, when and I don't focus on weight with my clients at all because I feel like at this point in our lives we need to be focusing on things that are much more positive for us. So, if that might be they want to get fit enough to go hiking in Peru next year, or they want to be able to run 5 kilometers to go and park run with their kids, or whatever that goal might be, things that are positive are more likely to be successful than telling yourself you have to lose something because that doesn't make you feel good. And I think we're done with that now at this point in our lives. We need to build ourselves up a bit and focus on things for the right reasons, and that reason's gotta be us.
And I can tell you from my experience with, people that I know is that when you're focusing on weight, you're not focusing on weight. This is what I've always found. People are not focusing on what's right for them. They're looking at
Yeah.
what everyone else is doing
Yes.
and deciding that I want her body, therefore I need to look like her. And it's like, well, every single body shape is different. Like, every
Yeah.
single person is different. And I know it's always been sort of a problem for me because I've always had when I was younger, I had no weight problem. You said, like, in your teenage years, you were not eating. I literally used to eat like a horse. I was pulled out of class because they thought my parents weren't feeding me because I had like a problem where I was so skinny. And so I could not put on weight. I'm like, you have no idea how much I eat. I cannot put on weight. So I had the opposite problem.
Mm.
But when I got into my perimenopause years, that changed, and I started to now I actually probably am normal and I
Yeah.
do put on weight. But what I find is if I'm concentrating on weight loss, my mental health is
No.
frustrated about I'm thinking about, like, am I gonna fit into that dress? Whereas all I concentrate now on is getting enough muscle mass, making sure I'm fit, making sure that I can go for, like you said, going for that walk, that I'm not feeling tired after I've gone for a long walk. I just did 20,000 steps the other day. We were in London. I did 20,000 steps and did not even bother me at all.
Yeah.
Um, so that comes from the fact that I'm making sure that I'm fit, not because I'm worried about my weight. And what I found also is it naturally falls off when
Yeah.
you're thinking about all the healthy reasons why you're doing it.
Yeah, that is so true, and it's the reason that I maintain my fitness too. I've got teenage boys, and we just went to Italy a few weeks ago, and they wanted me to come on this canyoning adventure with them, and it was hardcore. It was like 6 hours of hiking and jumping and abseiling, and I was just, blessed with myself that I was hiking up the mountain and wasn't puffing because I'm so fit, and I was just like, and the boys were proud of me, and
Yeah.
it's so cool
You
to.
didn't miss that experience.
Yeah, no, I didn't sit it out because I wasn't fit enough, and I'm, grateful to myself for showing up, when I didn't want to half the time
Yeah.
to go and do those sessions when you don't feel like it. And but when you're doing it for the right reasons, it's actually a lot easier to focus on the positives rather than getting down on yourself because you couldn't stick to a meal plan or something. Because let's face it, if you've got children, then sticking to any kind of rigid diet is exceptionally difficult. You know, things can go pear-shaped so fast when you've got a family to look after, and we don't need that restriction anymore. We just need to know how to nurture ourselves properly, because then we have that inner confidence to know what to do, and that's where, we can really get our power back.
Yeah, I love that. Tell me a little bit about your book, and also tell me a little bit about anyone listening. What would they need to do to get started? Because I think now we've explained a lot of different scenarios, but let's say someone's sitting there going, yeah, I actually need to change something about my situation. So I think your book explains that a little bit, but yeah, where would you suggest people start with that?
So I have a book, and the book came about a little bit by accident, actually, because I had done a lot of research for the program that I have written, and in the purpose of, putting some of the research together, I thought, oh, this might make a good book. And yeah, 6 months later, it's done. It's finished, and it's out. So it's great, and I'm super chuffed with it, actually. So it's basically encompasses the messages that we've just chatted about today around helping people understand the big picture science of gut health, but putting it in a perspective that helps you make sense of that complex science and doesn't and tries not to overwhelm people, but help you navigate it in a way that is practical. And I think, particularly for women, yeah, the science is cool, but really the so what factor is the most important thing for you. Is like, okay, that's really nice, but how do I actually use that in my life? And yeah, those are the messages that I wanted to help people with. So the book is an extension of the program that I run, and the program that I run is it's a self-paced program, but because I'm really big on the sort of compassion and the kindness and the community aspect of what I do inside the program, there's also like virtual catch-ups where we meet and we have monthly topics on various things so people can engage with the content. So it's not like, I don't like when people just throw nutrition information at people without actually providing the guidance and love and support that goes with it, because we need that at the moment. And I think for women particularly, that's really important. So I work through, there's 8 weeks of content where we work through all the 4 pillars of gut health. And so it's not just about diet and fiber, and we delve into all of those in detail, but it's also about how you navigate all of that complex information around food, but also how to manage it with lifestyle and stress and the gut brain axis, and then how it influences your hormones and how to put those pieces together. So it's a big picture tour, but with practical tools along the way to navigate, so people leave feeling like they know what to do with their body going forward.
Fantastic. And what are the 4 pillars of gut health?
So the 4 pillars that, and this is sort of an approach that came to me one night, when you're just half asleep and you wake up with an idea. That's kind of how this 4-pillared approach came about, because I was trying to think about the best way to put the science together so that it made sense. And so the 4 pillars of gut health are, the first part is the fiber and all the components of fiber, so feeding your bacteria properly. So bacterial fuel is the first pillar, and then bacterial supplements is the second pillar. But that's all about looking at things like polyphenols and all the other components in food which don't directly feed the bacteria, but they influence the bacteria. So all of those nice colourful compounds in food, We talk about alcohol and preservatives and things in ultra-processed foods that can also impact your bacterial populations. And then pillar 3 looks at lifestyle, so stress and exercise, how those influence your gut bacteria, and then linking that with the gut-brain axis. So we talk about your gut talking to your brain, but also your brain talking to your gut. And so we work on it from both angles, because people who have gut
Mm.
issues often only focus on the diet, but their thinking can also influence their gut. So we need to work on things from both angles, because otherwise you can work on your diet and you might not get anywhere. But really, it's adding in some exercise and perhaps a bit of mindfulness training or meditation that can really finally shift things to where you want to be. And then the last pillar is environment. So things like social connections and being outdoors can have a big impact on our gut microbiome. And it's really cool science, but it's actually really important for our mental health as well. So putting those
Mm.
pieces of the science together. And then all of those pillars are underpinned by our mindset. So I talk about it as watering a garden, and the pillars are like 4 plants. And unless you water the garden with knowledge and understanding, but you have a mindset which is a growth mindset to enable those plants to grow, then you really can flourish and grow the whole garden properly. And we talk about the way we talk to ourselves and what we say to ourselves in the mirror, and how we think about food, and how we think about reframing some of those things so that we do end up on those more positive discussions with ourselves, rather than looking in the mirror and saying, oh my God, I'm so fat. Because
Uh,
that's not helpful for us anymore, and it's not going to help us be the best versions of who we're meant to be.
Okay, so I have a question for you. It wasn't
Yep.
on my list, so
Yeah.
you don't have
It's
to
popped
ask
in.
this. So I'm putting you on the spot. If there's a woman listening now and she's thinking to herself, but I've tried it. I've tried the
Mm.
diets. I've tried the eating healthy. I've tried the mindset stuff. I've tried, and here I am not in a good place still. What would you tell her to do to start off with? What's her first baby step that you would recommend to her?
Okay, so the first thing is that she needs to have her confidence back, and I think that's the key here. And the confidence comes from within. So we need to work on that from 2 angles. The first is the mindset, and the second is knowing in a bit more intimate detail about what the gut's actually doing on the inside. So understanding what the problems are, like what are the issues? Is it bloating, or is it constipation? What is the issues that we're facing, and how can we specifically change your diet to manage those things? And then the thing that I do quite differently to other nutrition programs is I don't advocate for people changing their diet all at once. I think that's completely unsustainable. And so you have to do it in a way that works for you. And if you learn to be the master of your own nutrition, you don't have to feel like you're trying things all the time, because you just know what you need to do. Once you've got the tools, you know what you need to do, and you know how to do it. And that's the part of bringing back confidence that can really empower people for lasting health. And that's the end goal, isn't it? Right? We all want to be the best versions of ourselves in 20 years time still. So that's where we want to get to, and we want to do it in a way that benefits us mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and for our body as well.
I think what I took away from there was, and I love that what you say is that they don't need to change their diet all at one time, because I think that a lot of women are told throw out everything and then
Mm,
you've got to go out and
mm.
buy a whole new pantry of food and you've got to think about this, and this, and you're going to have to make a diet plan for the next 30 days because you're going to have to work out everything that you're going to eat and blah, and it just becomes overwhelming. Like,
It's so
I've tried
overwhelming.
that before and it doesn't
Yeah.
work for me. And I don't think it works for anyone unless you're a robot.
Yeah, and when even I talk a little bit. I think there's a couple of paragraphs in my book about The Biggest Loser, because there's a documentary on Netflix now about The
Mm.
Biggest Loser. But and quite coincidentally, I'd already talked about that in my book as well, because what they did with those people on that game show, well, it was like a game show, but it
Yeah,
was
it was,
a
yeah.
reality show. Um, what they did is they went in and cleaned out their whole pantry and replaced it with different foods. And yes, that is overwhelming. And unless you've got the habits in place and the systems in place to support that new lifestyle, it's not going to be sustainable, because let's face it, if people listening have got a family or a full-time job, that's hard. That's really hard to manage life, just keeping on top of your life admin and your grocery shopping, let alone trying to cook dinner every night of the week. So, I hear you, and it can't be that way if it's going to be successful. And that's why I'm very much an advocate for helping people just implement one small thing at a time, because that builds your confidence too, right? If you
Mm.
change one thing and you can do that successfully and give yourself a gold star on the fridge at the end of the week because you did that, that builds you up, and that's what we need to be doing more of.
Yeah, I love that. For someone who, after all my stomach stuff, I just slightly told you, but at one stage I went 28 days with no food. I did that 2 different times, that I had to clean out my stomach. I did a full reset and I had to be on a special amino acid protein thing, and thinking that that was where my problem laid. I told you it's not where it laid, but I've had 0 food in my stomach for 28 days, where it was crazy. And what I went through in that process on 2 different occasions, while still cooking all the family meals for
Oh.
4 kids. And,
Oh, wow.
yeah, that was intense. But, I've been through every single type of, and mine's all been because of allergies, but trying to go through those things at that extreme level, it's never going to work successfully. And
No.
the difference of, like what you're just saying, one small thing that I changed because of what you just mentioned, and that must be what I didn't know it was because fiber is different things. But for example, adding in different colors of lettuces.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that actually is a big thing that they say, and that must be what you're talking about, I'm guessing, that
Yes,
it's a different type of
absolutely.
fiber
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Yep.
each different color.
Yep.
Um, and that was just a small thing that I implemented of, instead of going to the shop, now I never buy iceberg lettuce. I buy it occasionally if I want to do wraps or something, but generally I don't use the basic lettuce. Yes, okay, it costs a bit more to have the other lettuces, but I make sure that that is because I say, okay, I'm spending a bit more on those lettuces, but I'm buying the different colored ones. And that means that I'm getting more different nutrition into my
Exactly.
diet.
Yeah.
So,
And those are
with-
just one simple things that you can
yeah.
do to start with. And those simple things, and in fact, if it's just adding in 1 apple a day for a week, that's an extra couple of grams of fiber just by itself. And over a couple of weeks, you think about, if you add in a couple of changes like that, you start stacking things together, and then all of a sudden you're hitting your fiber goals and you're feeling better. And that that was easy, and it doesn't have to be hard if you do it with the right mindset and you understand the why behind it, so that you kind of got a feel for what it is that you might need to do next. So, you might add in some apples and or whatever, but you need a bit of confidence to understand what else might be a gap in terms of the other types of fibers that you need as well.
And I think another thing, if you've got kids under 18 that are still living at home, I think the good thing about doing it that way as well is it's a little bit sneaky for them, that
Oh,
they're not getting
absolutely.
overwhelmed, because they
Yeah.
think a kid going, "What? You mean that I'm not gonna eat all of this stuff anymore?" And then you throwing in like, "Well, today we're gonna have like a little fruit salad with yogurt instead of having nothing at the end of our," like all of those little things. And then you just add it into the natural progression of, I have this argument with my daughter all the time because she's with her dad sometimes. And then she comes to me, I'm like, "How many fruits did you have yesterday?" "I had a banana." And I'm like, "Did you have any other fruit?" "No." And I'm like, "Okay, well, today you have to have at least 3 different fruits."
Yep.
And I live in a country where fruit is not a great, vegetables are not great here. It's terrible. I tell people about Australia how amazing the supermarkets are. Here it's terrible. So yeah, you don't get the same sort of fruit and vegetables that I'm used to. So I'm like, "You have to have at least 3 fruits a day." And then she's like, "Oh, but I don't wanna have them," and having that argument with a child.
Yeah,
But
it's
once
hard.
she sees that it's part of well, that's what we do here,
Yep.
it becomes part of the routine.
Yeah, and it can be quite hard when you've got kids too, because they go through that teenage phase where they just want what their friends have got, and most of the time that's just junk. And
Toasty.
yeah, and, I've got boys and they're all bigger than me, so, they just eat an ungodly amount of food at the moment, so we best not discuss my grocery bills. But but I have to say that, they're at that time where they just want to eat junk because that's what their friends are doing, but what they get to eat when they're here is, a nutritious dinner, and we sit down and we eat it together, because food is more than food. It's also love and being connection, and, it's our time to chat for the day and catch up on what everyone's been up to. So, yes, we sit down for a nutritious meal, but it's the culture of the food where we do it with love. That's part of eating, right? It has to be fun and find our joy in having food. So I just hope that I set enough of a role model so that when they go out on their own, that they just fall back on eating the types of foods that they had when they were here, with me, because that's what I showed them was a good, healthy lifestyle. And that they're off on their teenage years at the moment, but they'll come back around, I'm sure.
Mm. I've got a whole story about that. I've done it on a podcast episode before that I've got 4 stepkids, well, I had 4 stepkids, and they refused. They were used to eating 3 meals, and that was it, 3 different dishes.
Yeah,
And when they met me, coming from my Polish heritage, so I made a lot of Polish food. I made growing up in Melbourne, where it's a foodie culture.
yeah,
I'm like really into cooking. They would come home, they'd come to our house, and they'd just walk in the door and go, "Ew, I'm not eating that. It smells disgusting." I'm like, "You haven't even seen it. You don't know
yeah.
what's in it."
I haven't tried
And
it.
then they refused to eat anything because they were just used to eating these 3 dishes, and that was it on
Yeah,
their mother's side. And then when they came to us, their dad wasn't, he was busy with work. So I got into a thing where I started saying, "Hang on a second, we have to set a rule that you have to at least try it.
yeah,
And if at least 2 of you don't like the meal, I won't cook it again. I'm not here to cook something for you that you're gonna hate. I'm not trying to make you hate food. I'm letting you experience different foods, because just because you think you don't like it doesn't mean that you're not gonna like it." And then we set a rule in our house that was actually a great one, where we said every single kid gets to have one food they never have to eat, and that one food that they could change it every 6 months. So whatever that one thing was, and they could change it. So at first they were like, "But I don't like that, but I don't like that." So then we set this rule, and it was funny. The youngest girl, she was at 10 at the time, or 8 at the time. Actually, she was like 8. She was the one that had like the most amount of food she hated. And then we said, "Okay, what's your one food you're not going to eat?" And she never set her food in the whole
uh,
time. I was with that family for nearly 8 years altogether. She never set a food in the end. And if she didn't have a food, she wasn't allowed to say no to that meal.
mm,
And all the other ones had their, like, one kid, he hated capsicums, like, just hated, like, dry reached from them for no other reason. And so he never had to eat a meal with it, but they were allowed to if they wanted to. And he would always eat pastas with capsicum, but just anything else, he was just like, "No, I'm not gonna eat it." Whereas she never had a food that she put on her list. So then it was like, she'd go, "Oh, I don't wanna eat."
try
I'm like,
it.
"Well, it's
You
not
have to
your
try
food."
it. You gotta commit.
And then she's like, "Oh, okay, then I'll eat it." And so it ended up being like that. And I found that really interesting. And it's really interesting to hear them speak about food now and how they
Yeah.
speak about food. And they say to me all the time, they're like, "Thank you so much for taking us through that experience, because I'm so open." And they say to me, they've all said to me, "My friends are shocked with how many foods I'm willing to try."
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? And you don't realize it when you're young, but, even when you look at the research now around, Mediterranean diet,
Right. Yeah.
but in fact, it's more than diet for that region, because they they prepare the food as a family together,
Mm,
and they sit together and have the meal together as a family, and the food is local. And food
mm,
is more than food, because it's an experience, isn't it? We try new things, we do it together, we share it together, and it's important not to lose sight of that with food, that it's often more than the food and the numbers that it comprises.
mm.
It's an emotional part of being human, and we forget that, and people argue about all the little details, but stepping back and just going, "No, it's dinner. I'm out with my friends. I'm gonna have a try a new thing and enjoy it."
Do you have any of your, son's friends say anything about, do they eat with your family, and do they mention the way your culture is around food at home? Because I had a
Yeah,
lot of that from the other kids, their friends. They were like, wow, it's really
yeah,
like that's how I am in my home.
we have we have some really nice meals here. Like I really value food, and I buy, I buy nice pasta, or I make. My son loves cooking. Actually, he's inherited my love of food, so he loves cooking, and he'll make fresh pasta sometimes.
Oh, wow.
We have a lot of, like, nice quality things. If I'm buying something, I make sure I buy the nice stuff. If it's cheese, it's nice cheese, or if it's olives, I buy the good olives. But the kids are very open to trying new things as a result of having a broad range of things offered to them here, which is nice. And, when we went to Italy just recently, that was their first time overseas, and they tried everything, and I'm so proud of them because they just tried everything. And yeah, hats off to them for just being brave enough, because I know a lot of people just won't do that when they go away.
Yeah, even as adults. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. So
Fantastic. So I would love to know if someone wanted to read your book or they wanted to know more about you, or if they wanted to jump in, you've got a free program that you offer as well,
yes,
a
yes,
mini
I've got,
program as well.
on my website, or perhaps I can drop a link for you to pop in, under
Yes,
your
I'll put that into the description.
so, yeah, there's access in there. You can start the program for free, actually. There's a masterclass and a free download, that you can get started on for free. No credit card or anything required, just an email address. And also, my book is available on Amazon.com as an ebook. I can't ship, worldwide just yet. Australia Post has just suspended shipping to the US some with the tariffs, but the ebook is available on Amazon, and I'm just arranging Amazon Print to do the hard copies if people want a hard copy. But if your listeners are in Australia, you can buy a hard copy off my website. Soon to be in bookstores also.
Fantastic. Well, you were waiting this morning to have it delivered to your home. The hard copy, you were getting
Yeah.
a copy of it. So we haven't actually seen the copy yet because you haven't even seen it in
Well, I have
print
I
yet, have
have
you?
got some samples here, but
Oh,
yes,
you do. You're getting more of
I'm
them.
very proud of,
Ah,
like, it's turned out so
fantastic.
well. And yeah, it's taken a lot of work, but to see it in the flesh is, it's pretty exciting.
Fantastic. Congratulations. I'm writing a book at the moment as well, so I know how much work goes into it, and especially trying to get your thoughts in your situation on paper in a way that people understand it. And
Yeah,
I do love the way you explain things. I think you explain everything in a really nice way, because sometimes I have guests on the podcast and they get very technical and they get into the whole science. And especially when you're passionate about it, it makes sense. But I love the way you explain things because it makes it really simple for women who all they want to do is just have a nice life and they want to make sure that they're healthy and they can look after themselves. So I love the way you explain it. And
oh,
your
thank
book,
you.
I look forward to reading it.
Me
So
too.
I look
Actually,
forward to reading through. And
one of
you've
my
already taught me something about fiber.
yeah, one of my friends actually said it was, reading the book was like having a conversation with me, and I thought that was really sweet because,
That's
yeah, it is hard to de-science some of, because, you do need to go into it a little bit to help you understand it, but it's an art of just trying to make it so that it's applicable and real, and that's the fun part.
I love it. Okay, fantastic. Angela, it was so great having you on the podcast. And I'm sure that once, we get some more information about different scientific information that is changing women's lives, I'm going to get you back on here again at another stage as well. So if
Thanks.
anyone wants to learn more about you, they can get into your free program. They can get your book on Amazon. And I'll leave all the notes in there. I'll leave the links in the show notes so people can get hold of you. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was lovely to have a chat.
Thanks, Angela, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. Bye.
Bye.